Hello and welcome to the latest in our series of GSA Snapshot Webinars. During these 30-minute snapshot sessions, we dig into a topic of interest, the global mobile ecosystem, drawing on the depth and breadth of GSA research to provide invaluable and unique insights into the current state of 4G and 5G networks, technologies, spectrum and devices globally. In today's snapshot, the team will share the latest data on 4G and 5G private mobile networks. First, a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into the event. We're joined by Joe Barrett, President of GSA, and by Simon Bryant and Luke Pearce from GSA Research. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions as we go through the event. Use the Q&A function on the sidebar. If you pose your questions as we go through, then the team will be able to draw on those at the end and address as many as they can once they've finished sharing the data and the insights. All the data presented today will be shared with you immediately following the event. You'll get a full copy of the presentation and the on-demand recording. You can download the presentation at any point during the event by moving your mouse over the screens and clicking on the download icon on the top right of the screen. And we'll also send the link to this summary report to you after the event as well. You can download the report immediately now, if you like, from the GSA website. The summary report is available to all. The full report, including annexes, is available to GSA members and associates. But to get things started, I'll first hand over to Joe Barrett, President of GSA, to kick things off. Joe.
Thank you, Richard. So just then a little quick about the about GSA for those that don't know the association. So been going since 1998, representing the global mobile ecosystem. We have 9 major industry executives from the supply, including Ericsson, Nokia, Intel, Samsung, Apple, Huawei, ZTE, MediaTek, and Qualcomm. And one of our main focuses is research, sharing data, what's actually happening in the industry, more detailed member reports that are also available to associates, so we're not suppliers in the ecosystem. And I think one of our great successes has been the Spectrum Group, with 185 participants globally, advocating and promoting the release of Spectrum for mobile. And we have a standards group and a 6G joint working group looking at the next G in the evolution of mobile. And we have other focused working groups, private mobile networks, as we're talking about today, and fixed wireless access, and associates that get access to our data has been growing for many, many years. The main thing is access to a Gambot database, which the research team is updating every month, and you can do your own analysis of all the data that we're collecting around devices, networks, technology, spectrum, auctions and chipsets around 4G and 5G. And obviously we do lots of cooperation, and I think the next big event is going to be WRC 23 in Dubai, looking at spectrum for 6G. So that's one of our main focuses this year. So without that further ado, I'll hand over to Luke, I believe.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Joe. Okay, so I'll move to the next slide. So thanks very much, Joe. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to our presentation, Private Mobile Networks in Numbers. My name is Luke Pearce. I represent the GSA research team as part of GSA's exclusive research provider at CCS Insight. So what we'll be showing you today are the latest figures from our recently published Private Mobile Networks report. That was published at the end of May, so that is now available on the GSA website to download the free summary report. And that report collects all the customer references, all the numbers up to the end of Q1 2023, so up to the end of March. A bit of background on the special interest group. They track customer references on a quarterly basis. So we're tracking not necessarily the individual private networks, but tracking it at the customer level. And that's been going for a while now, since the end of 2021. So just over kind of 18 months. The goal really of the group is to kind of accurately represent private mobile network traction, both to kind of support the analyst community and their reporting and their forecasts by having kind of a solid database of information, but also just generally to kind of promote further private mobile network adoption through kind of more industry collaboration. So kind of by leveraging the group's internal knowledge of their own customer references and pooling it together and aggregating it, we really can make the kind of most trusted and verifiable source of private mobile networks out there at the moment. The group was originally set up by Nokia, Huawei, and Ericsson, but in the last 12 months, we're continuing to add new members to that group. So we've now got Airspan, Mavenir, Keysight Technologies, Private LTE 5G.com, and since the last quarter, we've also now got OneLayer, who specialize in private mobile network security as well. So it is an ever-expanding group, and collaborating on the report and the references and driving conversation in this way. So if you are interested in joining the group or contributing in some way, then please get in touch. So just a quick note on some kind of definitions and what we're actually capturing in this report. So all references are 3GPP based. So we're just looking at 4G and 5G and GSMR based private mobile networks. So therefore, we're not including anything else like those based on Wi-Fi, Tetra, P25, WiMAX, Sigfox, or any network implementations using any network slices or any virtual networking functions on a router. They are not included within this database. We're also just looking at one reference per company per country. So we're increasingly seeing a number of organizations rolling out across different countries and things like that. So where there is one organization with multiple networks, that's just counted as one reference. Most importantly, perhaps, we're just looking at commercial contracts worth more than 100,000 euros. So we're doing that to try and exclude any small demonstrations or free trials that are not necessarily commercially interesting. So just looking at those kind of proper private mobile network kind of valuable networks as well. We are including both named and anonymous non-public references. So the named ones are public references that can be found via press releases and in the public domain. But actually a good portion of those, and we'll get onto this a bit later, are actually anonymized references, which are submitted directly from our private mobile network group members. And so, as I mentioned, a bit more of that later on. But that really helps to contribute this to being a kind of really valuable and unique database compared to some other sources. So into the numbers then, and as you can see from that chart on the right, we have seen a lot of growth, particularly between the years of 2017 and 2022. That's kind of 81% compound annual growth rate. And we reported in the end of last year that number eclipsed more than 1,000 for the first time at the end of last year, which is continuing to build on that good growth from about 2019 onwards, really, and another record year for the number of networks announced. This year in Q1 2023, that number now totals 1,148 customer references. So that's an addition of 69 new customers that have announced networks in Q1 2023. Of those, 402 of those are named and public, and almost 2/3 actually are anonymized. So that's 746 in there as well. So please bear in mind that these are numbers of customer references. So if you are looking for the actual kind of number of deployments or networks, please note that may be slightly higher, as each customer may have one or more networks. So just a bit about, looking at the kind of global traction of private mobile networks. There are about over 50 different equipment vendors now involved in the supply of equipment for private mobile network solutions, and that's increasing all the time. It's a very competitive space, and all kinds of different vendors are competing for business in this area. Recently, we've seen kind of lots of efforts, particularly from kind of pre-integrated solutions, managed services, lots of systems integrators, all trying to kind of package and simplify the adoption of private mobile networks for enterprises who are perhaps less familiar with cellular technology rather than kind of Wi-Fi or other solutions they may be used to. We've also now got kind of cloud providers or hyperscalers, particularly in the US, offering private mobile network solutions now as well. But of course, telecom operators are there, and I think we're up to about almost 70 different telecom network operators involved with private mobile network projects. So quite a few different kind of vendors, lots of partnerships, and quite a wide ecosystem around the equipment of private networks now. In terms of this geography, you can see from the map there on the right that private networks are deployed all across the world, and that's 72 countries that now have at least one private mobile network. Much of North America is covered, much of Europe as well, and parts of Asia. But still, areas for growth. Places in Africa are still kind of getting their first networks. Central Asia as well looks. There's definitely some potential there for their first network. So definitely increasing all the time. I think Egypt is a recent addition in Africa. So still opportunity for those to adopt their first networks. And when we look at that chart in the bottom right, we can see that Europe has the most customer references at 459, with North America and Asia following Europe. Latin America, Middle East and Africa, Oceania, all there, kind of more about kind of the 50 to 60 references. So still lots and lots of room for growth and potential in each of those different markets. So I think a lot of the growth in those countries, we think is definitely tied to spectrum and having dedicated spectrum for enterprise. So where organizations can alternatively get that spectrum directly from regulators rather than going through a mobile operator. And as you can see from that figure on the right, those countries in green where there is dedicated spectrum, generally there is quite a strong positive correlation between the number of references we have and those countries with dedicated spectrum. Certainly the US there sticks out with its CBRS spectrum, and that continues to lead the way in customer references. We've got that again growing 10% this quarter, so increasing its lead there. Germany as well, also almost increasing 10%, quite a close second as well. And generally we have seen lots of growth within Europe, Western Europe and Central Europe specifically. Places like France, Spain, Belgium, and the Netherlands, all growing kind of more than 10% on the previous quarter, although it is from slightly smaller bases, but definitely some kind of growth in those markets. It's important to note as well that some of these don't include those anonymous references where just the region is provided, but generally this chart is reflective of the trend we see across the different countries. So just a bit more about spectrum specifically this time. So a new addition since the end of last year, we've added spectrum information now within the annex of the report, which has all the countries and all the kind of allocated spectrum within those countries and regions. So when we look at some of the trends, we can see that spectrum is being allocated across all different types of spectrum. So we have lots of low band spectrum, particularly the kind of 410 and 450 megahertz. That's being used in lots of kind of utilities industries and PPDR networks specifically. The high band as well, we've also seen spectrum allocated in this way in the high band, 26 gigahertz, 28 gigahertz as well for things like millimeter wave private networks. And in fact, Spain, I think, was the most recent country to allocate spectrum in the high band at the end of last year. However, I think it's kind of really the most countries have allocated dedicated spectrum within the mid band, which is what you're looking at here. And if we just kind of talk through some of the trends we're seeing, certainly Europe with the kind of C-band spectrum between 3.4 to 3.8 is quite a popular spectrum allocation. So places like Finland, Germany, Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden as well. The US, of course, with CBRS also fits within that band at kind of 3.55 to 3.7. Asia is a little bit different, maybe slightly towards the higher end of that mid band at kind of 4.6 to 4.9 in Japan and Korea. And then we also have some slightly more rogue ones there: UK, Finland, Sweden, France, Japan, all kind of operating at kind of the 2.3 to 2.4 and 2.5 to 2.6. So there is definitely a kind of mix across different regions and different countries even. So, you know, things like the EU, we're looking at kind of 3.8 to 4.2 to kind of combine these kind of frequencies a bit closer and have a more unified spectrum policy, just to help those organizations that perhaps have multiple sites across different countries and different regions. So, you know, certainly spectrum unification in this department is something that is being looked at in that regard. Looking at actually, you know, according to our references, which references are using which spectrum, we can see that C-band is certainly the most used. We can see that 80 references for C-band for the 3.5 to 3.7. CBRS as well is broken out separately, and that's got 55 references as well. So really, it is those two that are kind of steaming ahead in terms of where kind of private network spectrum is being most used as well. Looking further down the list, we can see that, you know, millimeter wave is there, but kind of towards the bottom of that list, other high band frequencies as well, generally in kind of fewer than 10 references really. So, and even those are still quite in kind of mostly trial or kind of test bed situations in manufacturing facilities or academic or educational institutions. So still early on in that kind of adoption curve. It's important to note as well that, of course, not all spectrum used, it necessarily has to be dedicated. Operator-owned spectrum is of course, used as well. For example, B8 and B28 there in the middle of the pack are quite frequently used as well. So just important to note that it's not necessarily limited to dedicated networks, and we do have quite a variety of different spectrums being used for private mobile networks across the world. So looking at the technology and particularly 4G and 5G split and how things are developing there. And generally, you know, there is a lot of excitement about 5G in private networks, and the two terms are tied quite closely together. But actually, you know, according to our reference database, LTE still makes up the majority of customer deployments, particularly those that are in actual commercial viability at the moment. So 54% of references are still LTE only, and that's remained unchanged since the end of last year. So not a huge amount of change there. Where LTE is used as well within 5G, so it's used 853 customer references. 5G is being used, and I think when you combine it with the LTE ones, 44% of references are using 5G. But, you know, again, similar to millimeter wave, a lot of it is towards some of those kind of expensive proof of concepts and deployments within more kind of test bed validation facilities. But, you know, there are some still running real operation in industrial situations. GSMR is in there as well at 2%. 5G standalone is used, and we're identified, we've got it in 68 references, although that might be slightly higher, but standalone 5G is being used quite a lot in private mobile network deployments relative to other markets. So on to the verticals and to see what's changed since the last update. Certainly manufacturing continues to forge ahead. I would say we've got 219 customer deployments now in manufacturing, and that's grown at 11% on the previous quarter. So still continuing to see very healthy growth there as well. In the report, you may be interested to see that we look at it by further subcategories as well, whether that's discrete kind of manufacturing or process manufacturing. Generally, it's dominated at the moment by electrical and appliance manufacturing, which is the most common, followed by vehicle manufacturing, so kind of automotive manufacturing. Those two are generally the two industries that are slightly more innovative in their methods of kind of trying these new networks. We also have education as well in the top three, as well as mining. These are, you know, quite early adopters still, and you know, lots of places in the US in the education sector deploying private networks across campuses, and Germany as well. Mining, of course, to you know, connect up those rural, remote areas quite a lot. Also defense and peacekeeping and power utilities, you know, large, very high secure networks making it into the top 5. In Q1 2023, though, we also saw that kind of public venues and oil and gas were the only other top sectors actually within the top 20 to grow more than 10%. So definitely some kind of growth there in the last few months or so. Public venues as well, particularly lots of sports venues over in the US using CBRS to kind of connect up that fan experience using kind of neutral hosts, as well as kind of broadcast capabilities and that kind of thing as well. So we are definitely seeing more growth there. Oil and gas as well, we've mentioned, across lots of parts of the world is getting lots of that. Just a note that, again, this does not necessarily indicate market value of those sectors or the number of networks deployed. So, for instance, some market segments like public protection and disaster relief, or utilities, for instance, one customer deployment in the database could represent a nationwide network deployment, which is equivalent in value to many hundreds or even thousands of campus-style private networks. So that's just an important caveat to note there as well. And just to look at some of those verticals, and we mentioned earlier about the references that are submitted confidentially by our members that are not available in the public domain. And we thought it would be interesting to show that if you do look at these different industries, and this is where our kind of GSA report may differ from some other numbers you may have seen. So if you look at that chart on the right, you can see that some industries, particularly those like defense and peacekeeping or maritime or power plants, actually there are about 75% of our references included in that are confidential and not available in the public domain. So these are often substantial multi-site deployments within these verticals, multi-million-pound contracts, and they're continuing to be won by SIG members. So it is important to note that just looking at a public domain, you might not get the full story. So this is why this database is super valuable and provides the kind of most accurate view of the industry's development as we go forward. So I think just to run through a few key messages before we take some questions then. So we've spoke about how it's it's a really exciting and dynamic space at the moment, and we've got a large number and wide range of market participants delivering solutions. We've seen really strong growth over the last 5 years, 81% compound annual growth rate. We saw that new headline number now is 1,148 customer references across 72 countries. They're still continuing to grow in 2023, despite some kind of macroeconomic worries. The private network market is still proving pretty versatile. We've looked a lot at spectrum today. We've seen the kind of strong positive correlation between those countries with this liberalized spectrum and adoption, particularly in countries like US, Germany, and other European countries that have continued to forge ahead and have a good first quarter of the year. We looked at mid-band spectrum as well, particularly CBRS and C-band, which we see is the most frequently used kind of spectrum at the moment. I've looked at the technologies. LTE still the majority of networks, 54% is LTE only, and 5G used in just 44% of network references. And finally, we looked at some of the verticals, looking at kind of manufacturing, still marching ahead there, as well as education and mining. But certainly some of the growth areas like oil and gas and public venues were the ones that kind of grew the most in the first quarter. And again, we've highlighted the fact that defense and peacekeeping, maritime, power plants, these kind of industries have a lot more confidential references and are quite unique to this database and this methodology. So I think that kind of brings us to time now. So if there are any questions, Simon, I don't know if you've been collecting any as we've been going on, but I'm certainly happy to kind of answer any questions that we can.
Yeah, certainly plenty of questions coming through, and there's a number coming through now. So there's a couple of questions just while Luke is getting his breath back. One is about India. We had a couple of questions about India, and one is, do you have any reference information on deployments in India, private mobile networks, industry-wise, region-wise? Yes, we do. We don't look at deployments, as Luke highlighted. We're looking at customers who are deploying networks. And in the Gambod, which I've just pulled up now, you can see that there are nine commercial networks based on our definition that we see in India at the moment. They are dominated by manufacturing. Also, the rail network is a user of private mobile networks. And there's companies like Bosch Automotive, Mahindra Chakan, Nokia Chennai factory in there, and a few others. We know also from our research, global research, that there is a lot of activity in India at the moment. So a lot of trials happening, a lot of very large trials. So there's expectation that things might pick up quite a bit in India moving forward. One question I'll throw to you, Luke, about India as well is: do you see Indian regulatory body allowing private spectrum or dedicated spectrum? I think there's been some news on that recently. Anything?
Yeah. So yeah, certainly. You know, with the kind of 5G auction last year, there has been a lot of excitement around the Indian market and the kind of telecom infrastructure in that market. I think, you know, the definite TRAI, the kind of regulatory authority in India, certainly mentioned that this is something they were investigating. And I think the official status is that it is still kind of under investigation. I think, you know, between 1 month and the other, it kind of ebbs and flows each way. But the official position, I think, is still kind of under consideration. But yeah, there are movements in either direction that sometimes suggest that it could move towards the kind of dedicated spectrum. But then I think more recently, rumors have swung kind of the other way. So the official is that it's still kind of under consideration. There is nothing official to announce on that one yet.
Thank you. Another question here is: your 44% 5G reference, is that based on NSA or standalone?
Yeah, it's not always possible to identify whether that is standalone or non-standalone. That detail is sometimes not known or withheld by some of the SIG members. So we don't have that breakdown at the moment. So where standalone is identified, that's 68 references of that total number, but the likelihood is that number could be a bit higher. So yeah, is that kind of information not exactly. We can't exactly have visibility on that at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. One comment is about the spectrum in the UK. It says one slide showed that the spectrum is available in the UK, but it is not. Any clarity you can put on that?
Yeah, I would just say if you can refer to the annex in the report, there is further detail on each of the countries and the breakdown and the spectrum used. I think that one in the UK is referring to the kind of shared spectrum policy, which is in place in the UK. So that could be seen as dedicated spectrum for this use case. But there are kind of notes within the annex that do describe that in more detail. But yeah, this was kind of compiled through the Spectrum group here at the GSA with major industry executives across all the different companies involved. So yeah, but of course all comments on that is appreciated, and we will take that into consideration.
Thank you very much, Luke. I think maybe just one or two more questions. They are coming through thick and fast now. I mean, there's quite a few questions around trial versus commercial, and just to reiterate Luke's point that everything we're showing are commercial based on an investment of 100,000 euros. I don't know, Luke, is there anything you can say about the ratio of trials versus what we see in this data? Is there any kind of observation, even though it's not represented in our data?
Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily representing, the definition means we're not including any small demonstrations or free trials that are under 100,000, but we are still including kind of proof of concepts or quite large scale trials that are over 100,000 euros. So when an enterprise is taking considerable investment in this, I would say that we have certainly seen a couple of references recently in Q1 where it was listed as a trial system, but now has now moved to a commercial deployment. So yeah, it's something that we would like to look at it in more depth, and there is some information within the annex if you do take a look. But generally, we are seeing some trials scale up to commercial deployments. It's kind of dependable on each industry. Each industry is a little bit different. Some are a bit quicker and kind of know what they want, and the use cases they kind of have a private network for. Some are kind of still spend a bit longer trying to work out where it can really benefit them and the use cases and efficiencies that it can drive.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Luke. I think we'll hold it there. We've got lots of questions. We will aim to follow up with each individual about their question following the webinar via email. Thank you very much. Over to you, Richard.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us. So I just closed today's snapshot webinar by just reminding you will receive a link to the webinar recording immediately after the event. The report, as Luke alluded to, is available to download from gsacom.com. There's a free summary report which includes all the data presented. If you like the annexes, which Luke was revealing as sort of contain the real meaty data, then that is available to GSA members and associates who are subscribing to the Gambod database. So if you really want to dig deeper into it, then I would encourage you to get in touch about finding out more, becoming an associate. In the coming months, we'll have more snapshot webinars, which will dig into the key reports, data and trends that the research team is tracking. Next event, as you see on screen, is the public plenary of the GSA 4G, 5G Fixed Wireless Access Forum. That's on Wednesday next week. A link to register for that, if you're interested, will be included in the follow-up email, or you can go directly to the GSA website to register now. For the latest updates on all GSA research activities and upcoming events, please do follow the GSA on the social channels. You'll find the Global Mobile Suppliers Association on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And if you visit gsacom.com, you can subscribe to our weekly Research Digest email, so you get all the reports delivered direct to your inbox. So finally, on behalf of the GSA team, all that remains for me to say is thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon at the next GSA event. Many thanks.